Why Florida State defensive end Jared Verse being drafted by the Rams in the first round is a big boom for Florida State football.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Seminoles. I'm your host, Brian Smith. Thank you to the everydayers that make this a great show. Please rate and review, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Would love to have you here each and every day. We are part of the awesome Locked On Network, your team each and every day. And today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. It's the hit twist on your phone that you can download from the App Store or on Google Play. This is going to be a fun episode because the NFL draft started last night. Jared Verse went 19th overall, for those of you that may not have seen it or don't remember, to the Los Angeles Rams. What is he going to do? Why is it going to help him? And the Noles is going to be the primary point of this podcast. And to be honest with you, this is a lot of fun because the Rams are a functional team on defense, meaning they will adapt. Their defense is going to be multiple. It's going to have a lot of different things that go on with it. And to be honest, I really think that Verse is going to be a good fit. So let's jump right in there. They play a 3-4 defense, technically. Now, the term 3-4 defense has adapted tenfold over the last several years because teams have so many different types of spread offenses. Having outside linebackers that consistently, at least in theory, drop into coverage kind of at a 45-degree angle, it helps take away slants. It helps you be a little more versatile against the screen game. But it's also very difficult, especially at the college level, to have guys that are big enough and fast enough to handle that in the run game and to a certain degree in the pass game as well. Like guys that are 250 to 260 at linebacker in college are extremely, extremely rare. They just can't cover well enough. That's why there's a handful of them in the world, and they're in the National Football League. Verse played DN for the Noles, as I'm sure most of you know, but that doesn't mean he can't put his hand down in the dirt occasionally while still being a primary strong side backer for the Rams. That's going to be his position. Again, he played DN for the Noles, but he is going to be standing up a great deal of time for the Rams. He will be in coverage a lot, zone fires, and just every type of complex, annoying thing you need to learn if you truly understand defense. He's going to be right in the middle of it. Their defense is not friendly to gain all the knowledge. It's a pain in the butt, but that's also meaning it's a pain in the butt for other NFL teams. So how does this help Florida State? Well, number one, he just went number one, period. That's something Florida State can sell to recruits. That's something they can sell, even more importantly, to be honest, for the short term, to the current roster. Hey, this is how you get to that level. He was a guy that was unrecruited, really, by the powers that be in college football because he was from Dayton, Ohio. It's a hotbed. Nobody wanted him. He goes over to Albany, gains weight, gets stronger during COVID, ends up transferring to Florida State, and it's one of the best stories in recent college football memory. Not just because this is a Florida State podcast, but I mean, it is extremely unusual to see this. Now he's getting to go to a team in a major market, have an opportunity to be under some of the best coaches in the world. Obviously, that franchise has been successful recently because they won a Super Bowl, and they've got a chance to go back. Verse will fill a role that will also see him on the field right away, which further enhances Florida State every time he makes a sack, every time he makes a tackle. And NFL Network or anybody else puts up a video, Florida State, their recruiting department can fire out stuff. This is what we want you to be next to recruits. And again, Norvell and his staff, Oda Higgins, everybody, they're going to have an easy time of it saying, look, Verse is gone. Now this is your chance, but this is how you need to work if you want to go 19th overall and make all that money. It's motivation. It's motivation. There's no other substitute for it. Sometimes players are great physically and or mentally, but how often are they dedicated from a consistent standpoint? That's the difference between an NFL player that actually makes the roster and contributes to a guy that has a cup of coffee and he's out the door looking for a job like the rest of us in the free world. So Verse, I expect to make a contribution right away, outside linebacker, but how else can he help them? Well, there's two other things that I think will be fun to see. And I'm just speculating here, and the Rams will have to play with it when he gets into minicamp and other things that go along with him being a part of their organization. But if you look at just two or three things from his career, I think it's possible. Number one, he was a tight end at one point. moved to D-end, gained a ton of weight. He's a guy that's not only been a speed rusher, he's now developed to the point where he can take on guys. If you look at his NFL draft, whatever site you want to use, evaluations, every one of them in some way, shape, or form is going to talk about his heavy hands. What are heavy hands? When he makes contact, even with the offensive tackle that's 315 or something like that, Verse can either stymie him and sometimes even push him back. I know that I've mentioned this several times, but it's just hilarious. The play where he took the Florida offensive tackle and just threw him, like literally, back towards the quarterback last year, is something that needs to be brought up. That is big time strength. Like his upper body strength for a D-end is more like a nose guard. Can't teach it. Yeah, I know he got trained at Florida State and their weight program is really good, but there's a lot of natural skill to that, and it's something that he's utilized. He's taken advantage. And you know what? Tip of the cap to Jared for doing it. Not everybody takes advantage of what they have. He has maximized. So I think that they'll probably gain more advantage short-term from the current roster seeing that, because these guys are just learned through osmosis, but recruiting's also going to be there. I know that myself and many others have talked about how Florida State needs to take another step up as it relates to high school, specifically high school recruiting on D-line. This is the other part, man. Like the videos and the pamphlets, the text messages, all that, it's pretty easy. If there's anything else to say about it, I'm just curious how quickly he signs endorsement deals and all that, and they can use. And I don't know any, but that's a big deal. From talking to recruits in the last couple of years, especially with NIL, they're fascinated with how the NFL guys do it. And that's not my realm. I'm not trying to say it is. I'm not going to go into depth. But anytime he signs something, even locally, again, because he's in LA, he'll have more opportunities than most. Jared should be able to get a lot of different things if he wants, and who knows, with any kind of thing from Beats by Dre to some kind of deal with the shoe, some kind of deal with clothing line, whatever it may be. Jared will have an opportunity as a first-round pick. And again, congratulations to him for all the hard work, all the people, Oda Higgins, everybody along the way that helped him get there. That's fantastic because it's not easy to do. Speaking of defensive line, we're going to talk about that and the portal coming up next here on Locked On Seminoles. There are a couple guys to talk about, and it's not just Florida State in the running. It's potentially teams they could play against either in the regular season or in the postseason, right here on Locked On Seminoles. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Also going to talk a little bit about Locked On Sports Today. This is an opportunity for several of you to learn more about it. It's a 24-hour streaming service that you can get right here on YouTube. Like if you're watching that, you can just type in Locked On Sports Today and you can get there. And we also have an opportunity to watch a lot of different things without all the yelling and screaming you would get with like Fox Sports or ESPN that you see all the time. So again, it's a 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And it's also free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. So the portal is something that Florida State has used really well up until this point of the Mike Norvell era. They're getting into the defensive tackle battle, and we've talked about this quite a bit. I was curious what they would do, and I have a couple of theories on this. And if you want to comment on YouTube or you want to just make comments in general to yourself or yell at the screen. That's up to you. But I think there's a primary reason that they're in heavy on it beyond need. And that's because they don't want some of these guys going to schools they're looking at beyond Florida State. So here are the guys in question. Right now, Derek Harmon and Simeon Barrow, 2 kids from Michigan State, they're pretty good defensive tackles. Got some proven track record, have the natural size you're looking for to play on the interior, and both of them are getting ready to visit Miami. Let's not kid ourselves. If they got 1 or 2, I have no idea. But if they got those guys, Miami would be at an advantage because Florida State and Miami's rosters are really close right now, just talent-wise. It's one thing to lose a player. It's quite another to lose a player when that individual is going to your arch rival. I have no idea where these kids are going, and I'm not saying that there's any way to grade it out and say who would do better with them. It's too early for that stuff. Both teams have great D-line coaches and all that. And there's other schools involved too. I'll talk about it in a second. But never discount the notion of losing a player that you're from the recruiting ranks, JUCO ranks, or the portal if they're looking at your rival. Just my opinion, but I never think that should be overlooked. So let's talk a little bit about both of them. Simeon Barrow is the guy with a little more stats. He's got over 100 tackles in his career, 3 years at Michigan State. Probably the bigger playmaker, give or take 300 pounds, but that's not the point. There's just a supply and demand problem right now in defensive tackle. LSU, Auburn, all these schools are looking at guys, and very few have enough depth. And it's weird. It's so weird. LSU doesn't even have the starters they need, by LSU standards. Florida State's pretty good at D-line, but I'll go over a stat here in a second that makes you think they still can take another step forward. And that's another thing too. If you were to guess right now, let's just talk about it. What do you think Florida State ranked in 2023 last year nationally out of 133 teams in rush defense? I guessed before I looked it up, and I was way, way too high. Here's the number. They were 72nd in the nation. They gave up over 150 yards rushing a game. Say whatever you want. They had a pretty good defense last year, especially in the passing game. The secondary is fantastic. But if Florida State's going to contend for titles, you're not winning a title with the 72nd rush defense. You're not. You're not sniffing it. And I know a lot of Florida State fans don't want to hear that and all. This is just straight honesty. If you look at the teams that win titles, there might have been one team not with the top 50 rush defense in the last decade. They're at 72nd. They got some good players, and we don't know what Jackson can do and all that. I get it. You cannot have enough. There is infinite number of guys you need at defensive tackle. And it's not just for you. Again, this goes back to the original point about this topic. If you have them on your roster, they're not playing against you. When Florida State was great in the 90s, they had third-string guys, literally, that were better than some teams they played against on the first team. And I am not BSing for some of the younger people out there. It was utterly ridiculous. They are not in the stratosphere with where they were in recruiting in the 90s. Not in the stratosphere. If they're going to get there, you can use the portal now. It's a different game. I get it. But this stopgap measure it's ironic that 2 kids from Michigan State are possible, but both of them are possibilities from the Noles. Both are 300 pounds, and both of them can move. I just went and watched because I couldn't remember the other kid, Derek Harmon. He's like 6'3", 6'4", 320 pounds. I'm like, he's probably just a big ogre, kind of a run stuffer. I found some practice video from Spartan Magazine on YouTube. Holy moly, that kid's explosive. I just wonder if maybe he's not as instinctive in games or something. I didn't go through everything, but that's the kind of guy that can be disruptive. And then you put him in there with some of these other guys like Farmer, Jackson, etc. Then you've got something. They're at least one defensive tackle short from being at the elite level. And that's even if Harmon or whoever they would get is a hit. But as I always say, you want to have more bullets in the gun. Florida State would do well to get them, at least one, if not both. And they would also be keeping them away from Miami, whatever player or players they get. Can't go wrong with that. Just to give an idea of some of the teams involved here, like LSU and Missouri and Miami are after Barrow. Like those teams really need defensive tackle help. Missouri's Chris McClellan transferred to Missouri, or Florida's Chris McClellan transferred to Missouri. He's probably their best defensive tackle, and he's a guy that got some reps last year at Florida. but they're really unproven on an otherwise really good football team. So I'm sure they're going to throw a ton of NIL money at it. That's part of the deal. I know some people will disagree with me. They're wrong. Florida State's NIL is not as strong as some other schools. They're not a top-tier NIL school. They're not. It's good, but it's not where some of these others are, like Southern Cal, Auburn, some other schools. They have pockets that are just insane. Miami's got their guys, one of the soccer guys in South Florida, unlimited money, basically. So I'm curious if they can get any of these kids. And if they do, I think it would speak to something that I constantly harp on here, culture. Florida State wins games because of their culture. You got to use that in recruiting. Sometimes it's not discussed enough. I actually saw somebody, this is so dumb, make a post today talking about, I don't care how we get there, just win. Right now, it's not about culture. It's just about getting great players. That is never the case. It is always about culture. If these guys are just going to come to your school for money and the only thing they care about is the highest bidder, be careful for what you ask for. And I'm just using these two for an example. And I don't know Harmon. I don't know Barrow. I don't know either one of them. But if the only thing they care about is the highest dollar amount with NIL, be careful for what you wish for. You could quickly become, and this not talking about Florida State, but any school, what A&M became. And that's a bunch of dysfunctional, really talented players not playing together. And when the money wasn't where they wanted it to be because boosters got pissed they weren't winning, a ton of them transferred. The locker room was not where it needed to be. They were nowhere good compared to where they should have been, and they fired their coach. Florida State hasn't made that error yet. Some schools might kind of follow that A&M path, and I think Miami could be going into that trap. I'm a little worried about the direction they're going because they're just throwing money at a ton of guys. They're probably going to get Damian Martinez, which he's great. I get that. But I think they're trying to do that too much. You got to sell your culture more. Some other schools too, but Missouri's school doesn't have the history, so I get it. They're kind of stuck in between. They might have to throw money at guys because not a lot of people want to go to Missouri. That's fine, but that means you're probably going to be a flash in the pan. Florida State is not a flash in the pan. They have a chance if they sell it right. They shouldn't have to give as much NIL, just be competitive and be a part of a great program. If the kids don't want to do that, Norvell, Hagens, and anybody else, it doesn't matter the position, to tell those players to pound sand. It's just my opinion, but you screw up your locker room, you will screw up your win-loss record, and then nobody's happy that follows or covers Florida State football, and that includes also the players and the coaches themselves. You got to have continuity with everybody wanting the same thing, and it doesn't start with how much money I'm getting up front from an NIL deal. It's just reality. Last thing I'm going to talk about here in just a moment, we'll talk a little recruiting, and some of what I just mentioned about NIL is a part of this, and what's going on with the battle, ironically, once again, that could come down once again to the Noles or the Canes, right here on Locked On Seminoles. All right, I'm sure you've played Monopoly at some point in your life. I know I used to play it all the time when I was a kid, and it's also something that now you can play right from your phone. You don't have to have the board game sitting on the side of your house somewhere. It's something you can download, and it's actually been downloaded 150 million times on the phone. So it's the great twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards, crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. You can compete with your friends in numerous ways in just small games, or you can compete around the world with different people. It's just like classic Monopoly. And you can also heist their vaults and have riches for yourself. You can do different things with raising taxes on the properties, just like you did in the classic Monopoly game. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go. It's now free on the App Store or on Google Play. Let's talk a little bit about recruiting. I contacted Byron Lewis, the running back out of American Heritage. He's one of the few kids that will honestly not just communicate with you, but he's pretty straightforward. Byron's a good kid, big-time running back. For those you don't know, he's just over 200 pounds, about 6 foot, and he is just a thumper, but he can catch. He's a every down back. Reminds me a little bit of Trey Benson. That's probably a pretty close comparison in style of play. Frames aren't all that much different. He might be a tad bit different in height, but I mean, the weight, he's going to play at 210 or so in college. Really good player. Right now, he's got Miami May 31st, Wisconsin June 7th, and Ohio State June 14th. But he does have an RPM pick. That's what they call it on 3 for Florida State, and he recently visited the Noles. I don't think he knows where he's going. I don't think I would pick anything right now, but Florida State was the pick from on 3. Now, Byron, I asked him about the rest of his visits because I know he's going to take an OV to FSU, and he said when he gets back from Colorado, they got a spring game this weekend he's going to, he'd update me. I think he's trying to figure out, hey, do I want to take an OV to there, or maybe this is one. I haven't seen it listed. He could make it his official visit. Depends on how they want to do it. And when he gets back, he'll fill me in. I would assume, just looking at the list, that the Noles would get the June 21st OV. That's like the last weekend. But whatever the case may be, this would be a good running back. Here's my question about him and how recruiting can be so complex that anybody can learn from, myself included. I know Byron's really competitive, and he's used to being an elite player. He sat behind Mark Fletcher Jr. his freshman year at Heritage, who's at Miami. But otherwise, he's been pretty much the guy. And there's another kid that came in last year. They recruited some, and he transferred back out. But he's going to be the main man at Heritage this year. Florida State's running back room is loaded. Now, I expect at least one guy to transfer between now and the end of fall camp. That's just the nature of the beast at pretty much every position in college football now. Quarterback being the most, but Florida State's running back room is super deep, is what it is. I don't know who, what, when, where, why. Somebody will leave. That's just the norm. Even the case, and you're going to lose somebody at the end of the season, you're going to lose Tofili, etc. Does he want to come in and build, or does he want to go somewhere where he might be able to start or be a co-starter as a freshman? Seeing the visit for Wisconsin on June 7th, and then there's Colorado, who definitely needs help in the run game. They don't have a guy like him, in my opinion, that's that talented. Makes me wonder if Byron's at least looking at it from a two-sided perspective. I can go to Miami, a school that I've been around numerous times, or Florida State, same kind of deal, home state institutions. Or I can go out of state and go to Wisconsin. That's an opportunity. And believe it or not, the other one, Ohio State, they're not very deep at running back right now, which is unusual for them, but they need help too. He'd have a better chance at playing early at both those schools. He would, until something changes here. I'm curious to see what he says when I contact him after this weekend, because, again, he's a straight shooter. Byron's a pretty blunt kid. I don't think that he knows what he's trying to do yet, and I'm sure relationships, which they always are important too. But there's certain schools that he's going to have a harder time breaking into the lineup. Does that really matter to him? Recruiting, it's I know fans are tribal, and they just can't imagine a recruit not going to their school. These kids look at it from how do I get enough playing time to get film to get to the NFL? That's their number one priority. It's not playing for the Hurricanes, the Noles, whoever. Those days are over. Just playing for the helmet. Those days are over. It's about finding a way to get to the NFL. Sorry to break that to people who don't want to hear it. That's just fact. But he's also a guy that does like both those programs a lot. So he's in a bit of a conundrum. And he's also a proximity to numerous other kids in the same boat at other positions. Do I go and take the risk of not playing early, having to go through my senior year? Because they don't only want to make the NFL, they want to turn pro after 3 years. Or do I go to a school I can play earlier at and make a big impact and kind of help change that program? You never know. So Byron Lewis is a guy to think about in that regard, and Florida State would do well to get him. Heck of a running back, but there's a long way to go in his recruitment. Thank you very much for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate everybody for coming in. I really do. Make sure you hit that like button and that notification bell and subscribe to this podcast. We'll be back this weekend. I'm going to Elite 11, check out some more kids, have some fun. Juju Lewis and a whole bunch of guys. Probably going to compare him a little bit to Tramel Jones and some of the other guys that Florida State had early next week here on Locked On Seminoles. So until then, everybody have a great weekend. Thank you very much.